I spent $26,000 on my wife's sister's surgery, then got uninvited from her recovery party. She needs positive energy only. My wife said then I went for a solo trip without telling them when the hospital called them about unpaid bills. They start. Let me tell you something about being the designated family wallet. It's about as rewarding as being a piñata at a toddler's birthday party. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 35 years old, and apparently somewhere along the way I got a tattoo on my forehead that says Emergency ATM in invisible ink. Because every time there's a family crisis, guess who gets the first phone call? Not the Red Cross, not GoFundMe, not even their actual bank. Nope, it's me, Marcus, the human credit line. So picture this train wreck. My wife Sophie comes home one Tuesday evening looking like someone just told her Santa Claus filed for bankruptcy. She's got that specific face women make when they're about to ask you to do something that's going to hurt your wallet more than stepping on a Lego barefoot. I'm sitting there, minding my own business, eating leftover pizza, and watching some mindless reality show where people compete to see who can be the most dramatic about absolutely nothing. You know, practice for dealing with my in-laws. Marcus, she says, and I already know I'm screwed because she's using her sweet voice. The same voice she used when she accidentally bought a $400 purse and tried to convince me it was an investment in our future. Clara needs surgery. Clara, my wife's sister, the one who thinks essential oils cure everything except her own drama addiction. The one who posts inspirational quotes on Facebook while asking people to Venmo her grocery money. That Clara. What kind of surgery? I ask, because I'm still naive enough to think this might be something reasonable, like getting her wisdom teeth out, or maybe fixing that deviated septum she's been complaining about since the Clinton administration. Gallbladder, Sophie says, and then drops the bomb that's about to nuke my savings account into the Stone Age. She needs $26,000. $26,000. Let me put that in perspective for you. That's a decent used car. That's half a year's salary for some people. That's my entire, maybe someday I'll retire before I'm 90 fund. But apparently, it's also the magic number that transforms me from Marcus the husband into Marcus the walking, talking, breathing bank loan. What about insurance? I ask, because I'm still clinging to this crazy idea that adults should handle their own medical bills. Sophie gives me this look like I just suggested Clara perform the surgery on herself with a butter knife. She doesn't have insurance, Marcus. You know that. Oh, I know that. I know a lot of things about Clara. I know she spends more on coffee in a month than most people spend on their phone bill. I know she's got a closet full of clothes with the tags still on them. I know she drives a car that's newer than mine and lives in an apartment that costs twice what we pay for our mortgage. But insurance? That's apparently where she draws the line on responsible adult decisions. Can't she get a payment plan with the hospital? I suggest, still trying to find an exit ramp from this financial freeway to hell. Marcus. Sophie sits down next to me, and now I know I'm really done for because she's breaking out the physical contact. She puts her hand on my arm like she's about to deliver news about a terminal diagnosis. She could die, from gallbladder surgery in 2024 at a modern American hospital. I want to point out that people survive this procedure every single day, that it's literally one of the most common surgeries performed, that more people probably die from choking on their morning bagel than from gallbladder removal. But I can see in Sophie's eyes that logic has already left the building, probably hitchhiked out of town with my common sense. So here I am, staring at my beautiful wife who's looking at me like I'm either going to be the hero who saves her sister's life or the villain who lets her die because I'm too selfish to open my wallet. And the really messed up part? Everyone already knows what I'm going to do. Sophie knows. Hell, I know. Because that's what I do. I'm the guy who fixes things, who pays for things, who makes problems go away with his debit card. Fine. I say, and I swear I can hear my retirement dreams crying softly in the background. I'll call the hospital tomorrow. Sophie throws her arms around me like I just agreed to donate a kidney instead of just draining my bank account. Oh my God, Marcus, thank you. You're amazing. Clara's going to be so grateful. Grateful? Right. I'm sure Clara's going to be absolutely overwhelmed with gratitude. I'm picturing thank you cards, maybe a fruit basket, possibly even a heartfelt Facebook post about what an incredible brother-in-law she has. I'm imagining family dinners where people actually remember that I exist for reasons other than my bank account balance. The next morning, I call the hospital billing department, which is about as fun as it sounds. After being transferred 6 times and listening to hold music that sounds like it was composed by someone who clearly hates humanity, I finally get to speak with a human being who explains the payment process. Credit card, check, money order, or cash. They're not picky. They just want their money up front. No payment plan, no delayed billing. No, I'll totally pay you back, bro. Just cold, hard cash. I hang up and stare at my laptop screen, looking at my online banking like it's a crime scene. $26,000. Gone. Just like that. My safety net, my peace of mind, my backup plan for when the world goes sideways. All of it transferred to cover Clara's inability to plan ahead. But I do it anyway, because that's what you do for family, right? You sacrifice your own financial security so your sister-in-law can get her surgery and then probably spend the next 6 months posting Instagram stories about her recovery journey while never once mentioning who made it possible. I transfer the money, and my bank account balance drops faster than my faith in humanity. The hospital confirms receipt, Clara gets scheduled for surgery, and everyone acts like this is just how things work, like I'm some kind of medical fairy godfather who waves his debit card and makes health problems disappear. The surgery goes fine, obviously, because it's a routine procedure that thousands of people have every week. Clara recovers beautifully, posts about a dozen selfies from her hospital bed, and starts planning what she calls her recovery celebration, because apparently surviving a common medical procedure now requires a party. And that's when I learn about the guest list for this celebration. Everyone's invited. Cousins, friends, neighbors, co-workers, probably the mailman and the guy who delivers her DoorDash orders. Everyone except the one person who made the whole thing possible. Because according to Sophie, Clara specifically requested that I not attend. Why? I ask, genuinely confused. She says you have negative energy. Sophie explains, like this makes perfect sense. She needs positivity right now for her healing process. Negative energy. Me. The guy who just handed over 26 grand without asking for collateral or a signed contract. Apparently, my sarcasm is incompatible with balloon decorations and sheet cake. Who knew that saving someone's life came with an attitude clause? So while everyone else celebrates Clara's miraculous recovery from routine surgery, I get to stay home and contemplate the fact that I'm now both broke and uninvited to the party I essentially funded. It's like paying for a wedding and then getting told you can't attend because your tuxedo might clash with the decorations. But hey, at least I can sleep peacefully knowing I did the right thing, right? Right? So there I was, Saturday afternoon, sitting in my living room like some kind of financial ghost, invisible to everyone except when they need money. The recovery party was happening exactly 12 miles away at Clara's apartment, and I could practically hear the laughter and clinking glasses through the walls of reality. You know that feeling when you're not invited to something you didn't even want to attend, but the fact that you're excluded makes you want to crash it just on principle? Yeah, that was me. Except I was too mature to show up uninvited. Or maybe too broke to afford the gas money after dropping 26 grand on someone else's medical bill. Sophie had left that morning wearing her best supportive sister outfit. You know the one. It screams, I'm here for you during this difficult time, while somehow also managing to look Instagram ready. She kissed me goodbye with all the enthusiasm of someone kissing a distant relative at a funeral, grabbed the gift bag we'd spent another $100 on, because apparently saving someone's life isn't enough. You also need to bring a present, and headed off to celebrate with everyone who mattered. Which, according to the guest list, was literally everyone except me. I spent the first hour doing what any rational adult would do, stalking the party on social media like some kind of digital private investigator. Clara had created a whole hashtag for the event. Hashtag Clara's Second Chance. Second chance. Like she'd been struck by lightning or survived a plane crash, not had a routine medical procedure that millions of people go through every year. But hey, why let facts get in the way of a good narrative? The photos started rolling in around noon. There was Clara, looking radiant in a flowy dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, surrounded by what appeared to be half the town. I counted at least 40 people in the background of one shot. 40. For a gallbladder recovery party. I've seen smaller crowds at actual weddings. And the guest list? Oh, that was the real kicker. There was Sophie's cousin Janet, who we hadn't spoken to since she borrowed our lawnmower in 2019 and never returned it. There was Mrs. Henderson from down the street, who usually only emerges from her house to complain about our music being too loud. There was even Clara's ex-boyfriend Derek, the guy who she claims emotionally traumatized her for 3 years, but apparently is fine to party with when there's free food involved. But the real punch to the gut came when I saw a photo of the catering setup. We're talking a full spread here. Fancy sandwich platters, fruit displays that looked like they were arranged by a professional, a dessert table that would make a bakery jealous, and what appeared to be a goddamn ice sculpture. An ice sculpture? For a gallbladder surgery recovery party. I didn't even have an ice sculpture at my wedding, but Clara gets one because her organ removal went according to plan. I started doing the math in my head, which was my first mistake because math and emotions don't mix well when you're already feeling sorry for yourself. The catering alone had to be at least $2,000. Add in the decorations, the drinks, the rental equipment I could see in the background, and we're talking about a party that cost more than some people's monthly salary. All to celebrate the successful completion of a medical procedure that I paid for, thrown by people who apparently think I'm too toxic to attend. That's when something inside me snapped. Not in a dramatic, throw things across the room way, but more like a quiet internal revolution. A little voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my bank account said, "You know what, Marcus? Screw this noise. You just got played harder than a GameStop stock during a Reddit rally." So I did what any self-respecting man would do when faced with the ultimate disrespect. I opened my laptop and booked myself a vacation. Not just any vacation, mind you. I'm talking about a full-blown, no expenses spared, my wife's family can kiss my ass, trip to the beach. I found this little place in South Carolina, right on the coast, with a balcony overlooking the ocean and room service that doesn't judge you for ordering dessert at breakfast. The kind of place where they bring you drinks with little umbrellas in them and nobody cares if you wear the same shorts 3 days in a row. It was going to cost me another $1,500, which normally would have given me heart palpitations. But considering I'd just blown $26,000 on someone who couldn't be bothered to invite me to her thank you party, $1,500 felt like pocket change. The booking confirmation email felt like a small victory. Flight, leaves tomorrow morning. Return ticket open-ended. Hotel room reserved for a week with the option to extend. No itinerary, no schedule, no family obligations, and definitely no drama about who's invited to what. Just me, the ocean, and enough alcohol to forget that I'm related to these people by marriage. I was just finishing up the reservation when Sophie walked through the door, looking like she'd just spent 6 hours at the happiest place on earth. Her cheeks were flushed, she was carrying a piece of leftover cake in a to-go container, and she had that satisfied glow that people get when they've successfully avoided acknowledging an elephant in the room for an entire afternoon. "How was the party?" I asked, because I'm apparently a glutton for punishment. "Oh, it was wonderful," she gushed, completely oblivious to the irony of the situation. Clara looked so happy and healthy. "Everyone was asking about you, though." "Everyone was asking about me." Right. The same everyone who was perfectly fine with celebrating the medical procedure I funded while I sat at home, like some kind of financial leper. I'm sure they were all very concerned about my absence while they enjoyed the catering spread that probably cost more per person than I spend on groceries in a week. "That's nice," I said, closing my laptop with the satisfaction of a man who'd just booked his own personal escape route. "By the way, I'm going out of town tomorrow." Sophie paused mid-bite of what looked like a very expensive piece of cake. "Going where?" "Beach vacation. Solo trip. Just me and whatever umbrella drinks I can handle without falling off the balcony." You should have seen the look on her face. It was like I'd just announced I was joining the circus or running away to become a professional wrestler. Pure confusion mixed with a dash of panic, because maybe it was finally occurring to her that the family ATM might be considering new management. "For how long?" she asked. "However long it takes," I replied, which was probably the most honest thing I'd said all week. That night, while Sophie tried to figure out what she'd done wrong and I packed my bags with the enthusiasm of a man escaping from prison, I couldn't help but think about the beautiful irony of it all. Tomorrow, while everyone was probably talking about what a great party it was and how wonderful Clara looked, I'd be sitting on a beach somewhere, finally getting my own recovery party, recovering from the realization that I'd been playing the role of family sucker for way too long. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's just getting the hell out. Let me tell you something about beach vacations. They're like a reset button for your soul. especially when your soul has been getting financially gang-tackled by your in-laws for the past month. I'd been living my best life for exactly 5 days, which in vacation time is like 5 years of accumulated peace and sanity. My daily routine had become beautifully simple. Wake up whenever my body felt like it, stumble to the balcony in whatever I slept in, order room service that included more bacon than any human should consume, and then spend the day alternating between the pool and the beach like some kind of tanned, relaxed ping-pong ball. I'd perfected the art of doing absolutely nothing productive. My phone stayed on silent, tucked away in my room while I worked on my tan and my complete disconnection from reality. The hotel staff knew me by name, not because I was causing trouble, but because I'd become that guy who tips well and asks for extra guacamole with everything. I was living like a king, or at least like a guy who'd finally remembered that his bank account wasn't a community resource for every family crisis that came along. But apparently, the universe has a sixth sense of humor and a strict 5-day limit on happiness. I was lounging by the pool, halfway through what I generously called lunch, but was really just a plate of nachos and my 4th beer of the day, when I made the fatal mistake of checking my phone. 17 missed calls. 17. The last time I had that many missed calls, my neighbor's house was on fire, and I was the emergency contact for their cat. The voicemails were like a greatest hits collection of family desperation. First up was Clara herself, and let me tell you, hearing her voice after 5 days of blissful silence was like getting slapped with a wet fish while you're trying to enjoy a sunset. "Hi, Marcus," she started, using that sweet, innocent voice that women perfect sometime around middle school for manipulating the men in their lives. "I hope you're doing well. Can we talk about the hospital thing?" The hospital thing. The hospital thing. Like $26,000 was some minor bookkeeping error, a little oopsie that we needed to clear up over coffee and small talk. Not, "Thank you for saving my life." Not, "I owe you everything." Just, "Can we talk about the hospital thing?" Like I'd accidentally picked up the wrong prescription or something. But wait, it gets better. The next voicemail was from Sophie's mother, Margaret, who has the unique talent of making every conversation sound like you're personally disappointing Jesus Christ himself. "Marcus, sweetheart." And right there I knew I was screwed, because Margaret only calls me sweetheart when she wants something or when she's about to deliver news that's going to ruin my day. I just got off the phone with Clara, and she's feeling very overwhelmed about everything. "I know you mean well, but please don't make this about money. She's been through so much. Don't make this about money." Let me repeat that for the people in the back. Don't make this about money. The woman who asked me to drain my savings account to pay for her surgery is now overwhelmed that I might want to discuss the $26,000 I handed over like I was buying a pack of gum. And I'm not supposed to make it about money. You know what Clara was overwhelmed about? Based on the social media posts I'd been hate scrolling through for the past 5 days, she was overwhelmed by all the thank you gifts people had been bringing her. Flowers, chocolates, gift cards, enough stuffed animals to stock a toy store. Everyone wanted to celebrate her miraculous recovery from routine surgery. The only thing she seemed genuinely overwhelmed by was the possibility that someone might expect her to acknowledge the financial reality of her situation. I sat there staring at my phone like it had just grown legs and started doing the cha-cha. The audacity was breathtaking. Here I was, finally enjoying the first real peace I'd had in months. And these people were calling me up to complain that I might have hurt feelings about being financially exploited and then socially excluded from the celebration of my own generosity. The third voicemail was from Sophie, and she sounded like she was calling from inside a hurricane of family drama. "Marcus, where are you? Mom called Clara. Clara called me crying, and now everyone's upset. You need to call Clara back and make this right. She's fragile right now." Fragile. Clara was fragile. The same Clara who'd posted a video of herself doing yoga on her apartment balcony yesterday, looking more flexible and energetic than I'd felt in years. The same Clara who'd organized and hosted a party for 40 people less than a week after major surgery. But sure, she's fragile, and I'm the big bad wolf for existing in the general vicinity of the money I'd given her. I ordered another beer and kept listening to the voicemails, because apparently I hate myself and enjoy psychological torture. There were calls from Sophie's Aunt Linda, from Clara's best friend Jessica, even from Sophie's cousin Mike, who I was pretty sure didn't even know my last name until this week. Suddenly everyone was an expert on family dynamics, and they all agreed on one thing. I was being unreasonable. Unreasonable. for going on vacation after paying for someone's surgery and then being told I wasn't welcome at the thank you party, unreasonable for not immediately calling back when the beneficiary of my generosity decided she was overwhelmed by the existence of the money I'd given her, unreasonable for not falling all over myself to apologize for having the nerve to expect some basic gratitude or respect. The best part was Margaret's second voicemail, where she really let her true feelings shine through. Marcus, honey, I know you're probably feeling unappreciated right now, but you have to understand that Clara never asked you to pay for her surgery. That was your choice, and now you're making her feel guilty about it. My choice. Let me paint you a picture of how much choice I had in that situation. Sophie crying about her sister potentially dying. The whole family looking at me like I was personally responsible for Clara's medical bills. The not-so-subtle hints about how some people have the means to help while others just have to pray and hope for the best. But sure, it was totally my choice, the same way paying taxes is a choice. Technically voluntary, but you're going to face serious consequences if you don't do it. I finished my beer and stared out at the ocean, watching some kids build a sandcastle that would be gone by evening when the tide came in. Kind of like my savings account, except the kids would probably rebuild their castle tomorrow instead of calling me to complain about how the waves were being unreasonable. You know what the real kicker was? Not one of these voicemails actually said thank you. Not one person acknowledged what I'd done for Clara. Instead, they were all focused on making sure I didn't have the audacity to expect any recognition or respect for my sacrifice. I was supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to pay their bills, and then disappear quietly into the background while they celebrated without me. Well, congratulations to them. They'd succeeded in making me feel like the villain in my own story of generosity. But if they thought a few guilt-trip voicemails were going to ruin my vacation and send me crawling back home with my tail between my legs, they clearly didn't know me as well as they thought they did. I ordered another beer and turned my phone back to silent. The ocean was calling, and unlike my family, it had never asked me for money. You know that moment when you're living your best life, feeling like you've finally figured out how to be happy, and then reality comes crashing through your beach vacation like the Kool-Aid man with a law degree? Yeah, that was my Tuesday morning, except instead of, oh yeah, it was more like, oh shit, here we go again. I was sitting on my balcony, enjoying what had become my sacred morning ritual of coffee that didn't come from a gas station and bacon that hadn't been reheated in a microwave, when my phone buzzed with an email that would have made Satan himself say, "Damn, that's cold." The subject line read, "Account balance update. Action required." Now, I'm not a gambling man, but I would have bet my last dollar that this wasn't going to be good news. And sure enough, when I opened it, there was a lovely little message from Mercy General Hospital's billing department, written in that special kind of corporate speak that's designed to sound polite while basically telling you to go screw yourself. Dear Mr. Hale, it began, because nothing good ever starts with Dear Mr. Hale. We hope this message finds you well. We are writing to inform you of a recent change to the account for patient Clara Whitman. As per your request during your phone call on March 15th, your name has been removed as the responsible party for this account. Please be advised that a balance of $2,100 remains outstanding and payment is now due immediately from the patient. And there it was, in black and white, the beautiful consequences of what I like to call the great phone call of liberation. See, what had happened was this. Sometime between my third margarita and my fourth existential crisis on my second day at the beach, I'd made a phone call to the hospital. A phone call that, in retrospect, was probably fueled by equal parts alcohol and righteous indignation, but was definitely the smartest thing I'd done in months. I called the billing department and basically told them, in my most professional voice, that I was no longer interested in playing the role of Clara's personal health insurance company. The exact words might have been something like, "Hi. Yes, I need to remove myself from Clara Whitman's account. I'm not her husband, I'm not her father, and I'm sure as hell not her financial advisor. I was just a guy who made a one-time donation to the Save Clara Foundation, but that charity is now officially closed for business." The billing representative, bless her heart, had tried to explain that it wasn't quite that simple, that there were procedures and paperwork and blah blah blah. But I'd been persistent, because apparently tequila makes me very good at bureaucracy. I'd explained that I had never signed anything making me legally responsible for Clara's ongoing medical expenses, that my payment had been a gift, not a binding contract to fund her entire healthcare future, and that if they had any questions about who was responsible for future bills, they should probably ask Clara, since it was, her body and her medical care. The representative had put me on hold for what felt like 17 hours, but was probably more like 10 minutes, during which I'd listened to the same terrible jazz music they play in elevators while contemplating whether this was the smartest or stupidest thing I'd ever done. When she came back, she'd confirmed that yes, they could remove me from the account, and yes, future bills would go directly to the patient, and no, this wouldn't affect the payment I'd already made. And now, apparently, that future bill had arrived, and it was Clara's problem, not mine. The beautiful irony was that this $2,100 wasn't even for anything major. According to the itemized statement attached to the email, because hospitals love their paperwork almost as much as they love their money. This was for follow-up care, pain medication, and some kind of special post-surgery monitoring thing that sounded like it was probably optional, but got billed as essential. The kind of extras that hospitals tack on because they figure if someone's already paying 26 grand, what's another couple thousand? Except now it wasn't my problem anymore. Now it was Clara's problem, and based on the 17 missed calls that started rolling in about 30 minutes after that email hit my inbox, Clara was not handling this development with the grace and maturity of someone who'd just learned an important lesson about personal responsibility. The first call was from Clara herself, and I have to give her credit for cutting straight to the chase. No, how are you? No, hope you're enjoying your vacation. Just straight panic. Marcus, what did you do? The hospital called and said I owe them $2,100 and it's due immediately, and I don't have that kind of money, and they said you told them you're not responsible anymore. I let it go to voicemail because I was in the middle of perfecting my poolside tan and didn't feel like explaining basic adult concepts like personal financial responsibility to someone who'd just thrown a party that probably cost more than her outstanding medical bill. The second call was from Sophie, and she sounded like she was calling from the scene of a natural disaster. Marcus, Clara is freaking out. She's crying and hyperventilating, and she can't afford this bill. What were you thinking? You can't just abandon her in the middle of her recovery. Abandon her. Like I'd left her tied to railroad tracks with a medical bill instead of simply declining to pay for optional follow-up care that she could have discussed with me before scheduling. But hey, why have adult conversations about money when you can just assume that the family ATM will automatically cover all expenses forever? The third call was from Margaret, and this one I actually answered because I figured it was time to start explaining some basic economics to these people. Marcus, she started, using that tone that mothers-in-law perfect for making you feel like you've just disappointed everyone who's ever cared about you. What is this nonsense about removing yourself from Clara's account? It's called setting boundaries, Margaret. I replied, settling back into my pool chair with the satisfaction of a man who'd finally learned to say no. I paid for Clara's surgery because it was an emergency. I didn't sign up to be her permanent health insurance provider. But she can't afford this. Then maybe she should have thought about that before planning a recovery party that cost more than her outstanding medical bills. There was silence on the other end, the kind of silence that happens when someone realizes they can't argue with basic math, but they're not ready to admit they're wrong. Marcus, Margaret finally said, you're being cruel. No, Margaret, I'm being realistic. Clara is a grown woman with a job and an apartment and a credit card. She can figure out how to pay a $2,100 medical bill the same way millions of other adults do every day. More silence. Then, so you're just going to let her suffer? I'm going to let her be an adult, I replied. There's a difference. After I hung up, I ordered another beer and contemplated the beautiful simplicity of my new life philosophy. The Bank of Marcus was officially closed, and apparently, that was causing quite a stir in the someone else will pay for it community. But you know what? That was no longer my problem. You know what they say about karma? It's a bitch with a really good sense of timing and an even better sense of irony. I was about to learn this lesson in the most beautifully twisted way possible, courtesy of a woman named Angela who was about to become my new favorite person on the planet, even though she was calling to completely ruin what was left of my peaceful beach vacation. It was Thursday morning, and I was deep into what I like to call my advanced relaxation phase. That magical point in a vacation where you've completely forgotten what day of the week it is, and your biggest concern is whether to have the fish tacos or the burger for lunch. I just finished my morning swim and was contemplating the philosophical implications of ordering a beer before 11 a.m. when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Now, normally I would have let it go to voicemail, because unknown numbers during vacation time are usually either telemarketers trying to sell me something I don't need or family members calling from someone else's phone to guilt-trip me about something I didn't do wrong. But something about this particular call felt different, so I answered. "Is this Marcus Hale?" asked a voice that was professional, polite, and had just the right amount of edge to suggest that this conversation was about to get interesting. "Depends on who's asking," I replied, because I've learned to be cautious when strangers call me by name. Usually it means someone wants money, and given my recent track record with family financial emergencies, I was getting pretty tired of being everyone's first choice for monetary solutions. "This is Angela Rodriguez from Celebrations by Design. I'm calling about the final payment for Clara Whitman's recovery party." And there it was, the universe's way of reminding me that no good deed goes unpunished, and that sometimes the punishment comes with interest and late fees. "I'm sorry," I said, because I genuinely thought there had been some mistake. "I think you have the wrong number. I wasn't involved in planning any party." Angela paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "According to my records, you're listed as the financial contact for the event. Clara Whitman's recovery celebration on Saturday, March 18th. We provided full catering services, decorations, entertainment, and coordination for 40-plus guests." I felt that familiar sinking feeling in my stomach, the same one I'd gotten when Sophie first told me about Clara's surgery, except this time it came with a side of pure, unadulterated rage. Because apparently, while I was being excluded from Clara's party for having negative energy, I was simultaneously being volunteered as the financial backer for the whole goddamn production. "Let me get this straight," I said, trying to keep my voice level while my blood pressure shot up like a rocket. "You're telling me that someone put me down as responsible for paying for a party that I wasn't even invited to?" "Well," Angela said, and I could hear the first hints of uncertainty creeping into her professional tone. "Clara mentioned that there might be some confusion about the payment arrangements. She said you'd want to handle the final details directly." "The final details?" "Right. Because apparently, in Clara's twisted version of reality, paying for someone's surgery automatically makes you responsible for funding their celebration party too. It's like some kind of medical expense package deal that nobody bothered to mention to me." "How much are we talking about here?" I asked, because I needed to know exactly how deep this rabbit hole went. "The balance due is $2,300, Angela replied. "That covers the premium catering package, the decorations, the DJ, and our full-service coordination fee. We require payment within 48 hours of the event, so it's actually a little overdue at this point. $2,300. For a party. A party I wasn't invited to. A party celebrating a surgery I paid for." The absurdity of it was so complete, so perfectly ridiculous, that I actually started laughing. Not a happy laugh, mind you, but the kind of laugh that happens when your brain can't process the sheer audacity of a situation and defaults to hysteria as a coping mechanism. "Mr. Hale," Angela said, probably wondering if I was having some kind of breakdown. "Are you still there?" "Oh, I'm here," I said, wiping tears from my eyes. "I'm just trying to wrap my head around the fact that I apparently funded a party that I was specifically told not to attend because my presence would bring negative energy to the celebration." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me right. Clara Whitman asked me not to come to her recovery party because she thought I might harsh the vibe, but she was perfectly comfortable putting me down as the guy who pays for the whole thing. Do you see the beautiful irony in that situation, Angela?" Angela cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Mr. Hale, I'm just trying to collect payment for services rendered. The arrangements between you and Ms. Whitman are really between you and Ms. Whitman." "You're absolutely right," I said, feeling a wave of clarity wash over me like a cool ocean breeze. "And since the arrangements between me and Ms. Whitman never included me agreeing to pay for her party, I think you should probably call Ms. Whitman and discuss payment arrangements with her directly." "But sir, your name is on the contract as the financial guarantor." "Angela," I interrupted, "let me ask you something. Did you ever speak to me directly about this party?" "Well, no, but..." Did I ever sign anything agreeing to pay for this party? Not exactly, but Clara assured us. Did I ever give you my credit card information or authorize any charges? No, sir, but… Then it sounds like Clara made some promises she can't keep, and that's between you and Clara. I'm just a guy who paid for someone's medical procedure and apparently got volunteered for party planning duties without my knowledge or consent. I could practically hear Angela's brain working overtime as she realized that she might have gotten played by Clara just as hard as I had. Except her version involved providing thousands of dollars worth of services without actually securing payment from the right person. Mr. Hale, she said carefully, if you're not responsible for this payment, then we have a serious problem. We don't have a serious problem, Angela. You and Clara have a serious problem. I'm sitting on a beach in South Carolina drinking a beer and minding my own business. But Clara said. Clara says a lot of things. Last week she said I had negative energy. This week she apparently told you I'm her personal party sponsor. Next week she'll probably tell someone I'm the Easter Bunny. The point is, Clara's word isn't exactly currency in the real world. Angela sighed. The kind of sigh that business owners make when they realize they've been screwed by a client and there's no easy way to fix it. So what am I supposed to do? We provided services worth over $2,300. You're supposed to call Clara and explain that the party fairy isn't real and that adults are responsible for paying for their own celebrations. If she can't afford to pay for the party she ordered, maybe she should have thought about that before ordering premium catering for 40 people. And if she can't pay, then you've learned a valuable lesson about getting payment up front from people who like to volunteer other people's money for their personal expenses. After I hung up, I sat there staring at my phone like it was evidence in a crime scene. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Clara had not only excluded me from her party, but had apparently told the vendors that I would be paying for it, creating a situation where I was simultaneously too toxic to attend and too convenient to not exploit financially. But here's the thing about closing the Bank of Marcus. Once you shut that operation down, it stays shut down. I ordered another beer, turned my phone back to silent, and went back to contemplating whether fish tacos or burgers would better complement my newfound appreciation for boundary setting. Somewhere back home, Clara was about to learn that party planning involves more than just showing up and looking grateful. You know what they say about fame. It's a fickle mistress who shows up when you least expect her and usually when you're not wearing pants. Well, I was wearing pants, technically swim trunks, but the point stands. I was minding my own business, working on my tan and my fifth beer of the day, when the universe decided to make me internet famous without asking my permission first. It started with a text from my buddy Jake, who works in IT and spends most of his time monitoring social media like it's his job. Which, come to think of it, it kind of is. The text just said, "Dude, you need to see this," with a link attached. Now, coming from Jake, this could have been anything from a funny cat video to something that would get me fired if I opened it at work. But since I was on vacation and had already achieved the perfect level of don't give a damn, I clicked it. What I found was a post from Mercy General Hospital's official Facebook page, complete with their fancy logo and that professional social media tone that screams, "We hired a 22-year-old marketing graduate to make us seem relatable." The post featured a photo of Clara looking radiant in her hospital bed, surrounded by enough flowers to stock a funeral home, with a caption that made my beer go down the wrong pipe. Thanks to the incredible generosity of her brother-in-law Marcus Hale, Clara Whitman was able to receive the life-saving surgery she needed. Stories like this remind us that sometimes angels walk among us in ordinary clothes. Clara is recovering beautifully and wanted to share her gratitude for this amazing act of love and family support. #Hospital Heroes, #Family First, #Second Chances. Angels walk among us in ordinary clothes. I was sitting there in swim trunks that had a questionable stain from breakfast and a tank top that advertised a bar I'd never been to, and apparently I was an angel. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a plastic spoon. But here's where it gets really interesting. The post had gone viral. Not just, "Oh look, a nice story" viral, but full-blown, shared 15,000 times in 6 hours viral. People were commenting like I'd personally cured cancer while simultaneously ending world hunger. The comments section looked like a digital prayer meeting, with everyone praising my selfless sacrifice and beautiful heart. "This is what family is all about," wrote someone named Brenda from Iowa. "Faith in humanity restored." added a guy whose profile picture was him holding a fish. Marcus Hale is a true hero. The world needs more people like him, declared a woman who apparently collected ceramic frogs based on her cover photo. The best part? The post had been shared by our local news station, 3 different church groups, and what appeared to be every middle-aged woman in a 50-mile radius. My phone started buzzing with friend requests from people I'd never met, all wanting to connect with the local hero who'd saved his sister-in-law's life. Within an hour, the story had been picked up by the local newspaper's website with the headline, "Local man's $26,000 gift saves sister-in-law's life," which made it sound like I'd donated a kidney instead of just writing a check. They'd somehow gotten hold of my work photo from the company website and slapped it next to a picture of Clara looking grateful and photogenic, creating this beautiful narrative of family love and sacrifice that bore absolutely no resemblance to the actual situation. My boss called me around noon, and I figured I was about to get fired for something stupid I'd posted on social media while drunk. Instead, he wanted to congratulate me on being an inspiration to the whole company and suggested that when I got back from vacation, we should do a feature about me in the company newsletter. Apparently, having a viral hero on staff was good for the corporate image. "Marcus," he said, using that tone people use when they're talking to someone they think might be secretly Jesus, "what you did for your family is exactly the kind of values we want to represent as a company. You're a good man." A good man. Right. The same good man who was currently on a solo vacation because his wife's family had decided I was too toxic to attend the party celebrating the thing I'd paid for. But hey, why let facts get in the way of a good narrative? The real kicker came when my landlord, Mr. Peterson, called to tell me he was taking $100 off next month's rent as a small way to honor what you did for your family. Mr. Peterson, who usually treated tenant interactions like hostage negotiations, was suddenly acting like I was his favorite nephew. "It's people like you who give me hope for the future," he said, which was particularly funny considering he'd spent the last 2 years complaining about everything from my parking to the way I closed my front door. By evening, the story had spread beyond our little town. Some blogger had picked it up and written a whole piece about the true meaning of family, using my situation as the centerpiece. She'd taken some creative liberties with the facts. Apparently, I was now a struggling working-class hero who had sacrificed his dreams to save Clara's life. The part about me being on a beach vacation drinking overpriced cocktails didn't make it into her version of events. But here's where the story gets really beautiful. While I'm becoming internet famous for being a selfless family man, my actual family is losing their collective minds back home. Sophie had called me 17 times, each voicemail progressively more panicked as she realized that their plan to quietly exclude me from Clara's celebration had backfired spectacularly. "Marcus," she said in her latest message, "you need to come home. Everyone's talking about the hospital post, and Clara is mortified. She never wanted this much attention, and now everyone's asking why you weren't at her party." People are starting to ask questions. Questions? Yeah, I bet they were asking questions. Like why the hero of the story wasn't invited to the celebration. Like why the family angel was nowhere to be seen at the thank you party. Like why the man who'd supposedly demonstrated the true meaning of family was apparently not welcome at the family gathering. The comments on the hospital's post had started to shift too. People were asking where I was in the party photos that Clara had posted. Someone had noticed that the recovery celebration photos showed everyone except the person who'd made it all possible. The narrative was starting to crack, and people were beginning to wonder why the hero was missing from his own success story. Margaret had left a voicemail that was equal parts panic and rage. "Marcus, this is getting out of hand. Clara is getting questions she can't answer, and it's affecting her recovery. You need to stop this. Stop this." Like I had somehow orchestrated my own viral fame from a beach chair while drinking beer and eating nachos. Like I had personally called the hospital and asked them to make me internet famous without bothering to check with the people who decided I was too negative for their party. The beautiful irony was that their plan to exclude me had backfired in the most public way possible. They'd wanted to celebrate Clara's recovery without acknowledging my contribution, but instead they'd created a situation where my contribution was the only thing anyone was talking about. The internet had made me the hero of a story where the actual family had decided I was the villain. I raised my beer to the sunset and toasted my accidental fame. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, And sometimes that humor involves making you famous for being generous to people who don't appreciate you. I could live with that kind of cosmic irony. After all, it was better than being famous for anything my family was doing right now. You know that moment when someone does something so spectacularly stupid that you actually question whether you're living in reality, or if you've somehow slipped into an alternate dimension where logic doesn't exist and common sense is treated like a rare disease. Yeah, that was my Friday morning when I got served with legal papers while sitting poolside in South Carolina, minding my own damn business. I was enjoying what had become my traditional breakfast of champions: coffee, bacon, and the sweet satisfaction of knowing I was 500 miles away from my family's latest drama, when a guy in a cheap suit approached my table looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on the planet. "Are you Marcus Hale?" he asked, checking his paperwork like he was hoping the answer would be no. "Depends on who's asking," I replied, because by now I'd learned to be suspicious of anyone who knew my name and wasn't bringing me food or alcohol. "I'm here to serve you with legal documents," he said, handing me an envelope with all the enthusiasm of someone passing along news of a terminal diagnosis. I opened the envelope right there at the table, because why let legal drama ruin a perfectly good breakfast when you can just incorporate it into the entertainment? What I found inside was so beautifully ridiculous that I actually started laughing before I finished reading the first page. Clara was suing me. Clara Whitman, the woman whose life I'd supposedly saved with my $26,000 donation, was taking me to court for emotional damages and financial sabotage. The audacity was so complete, so perfectly crystallized into legal document form, that I had to read it twice just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from too much sun and tequila. According to the lawsuit, I had caused Clara severe emotional distress by removing myself from her hospital account without proper notice, resulting in unexpected financial burden and anxiety during her vulnerable recovery period. Apparently, my decision to stop paying her medical bills without asking her permission first was considered a form of psychological warfare. But wait, it gets better. The lawsuit also claimed that I had sabotaged her recovery celebration by refusing to pay for the party vendors, causing her public humiliation and damage to her reputation in the community. Because nothing says emotional damage like having to actually pay for your own party like a regular adult. The cherry on top of this legal sundae was the claim that I had violated a verbal agreement to provide ongoing financial support for Clara's medical expenses. A verbal agreement that, according to their version of events, had been made during a family meeting where I had supposedly promised to cover all her healthcare costs for the foreseeable future. Now, I've got a pretty good memory, and I could not for the life of me remember any family meeting where I'd signed up to be Clara's personal health insurance company. But apparently, in their legal fantasy world, my decision to pay for her surgery had somehow created a binding contract to fund her entire medical future, like I was some kind of healthcare fairy godfather with unlimited resources and questionable judgment. The best part was that they were asking for $50,000 in damages. $50,000 for the emotional trauma of having to pay her own bills and the devastating psychological impact of learning that free money doesn't actually grow on trees. I'd seen less ambitious damage claims in actual personal injury lawsuits. I called my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Martinez who had the unique ability to make opposing counsel wet themselves just by walking into a courtroom. When I read her the lawsuit over the phone, there was a long pause followed by what I can only describe as the sound of someone trying not to laugh and failing spectacularly. "Marcus," she said when she finally got herself under control, "in my 15 years of practicing law, this might be the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And trust me, I've seen some doozies. So what do?" I asked. "We show up, we bring receipts, and we watch their case implode like a house of cards in a hurricane," she replied with the confidence of someone who knew a slam dunk when she saw one. The court date was set for the following Tuesday, which meant cutting my vacation short. But honestly, I wouldn't have missed this for anything. Watching Clara try to explain to a judge why someone should pay damages for refusing to be her personal ATM was going to be better than any entertainment I could have paid for. When the day arrived, I walked into that courtroom feeling like I was about to watch the legal equivalent of a train wreck in slow motion. Clara showed up with her lawyer, a nervous-looking guy who kept checking his paperwork like he was hoping it would spontaneously combust and save him from having to argue this case. The judge was a woman named Patricia Hawkins who had the kind of presence that made you sit up straight and suddenly remember all the times you'd lied to your parents as a kid. She looked at the paperwork, looked at Clara, looked at me, and then looked at Clara's lawyer with an expression that suggested she was questioning his life choices. "Counselor," she said to Clara's lawyer, "help me understand the basis for this lawsuit." What followed was the most beautiful display of legal gymnastics I'd ever witnessed. Clara's lawyer tried to argue that my initial payment had created an implied contract for ongoing support, that my removal from the hospital account constituted breach of fiduciary duty, and that my refusal to pay for party vendors was somehow intentional infliction of emotional distress. Judge Hawkins listened to this with the patience of someone who had heard every stupid argument in the book and was always ready to hear one more. When Clara's lawyer finished his presentation, she turned to my attorney. "Ms. Martinez, does your client have any documentation of this alleged verbal agreement?" "No, Your Honor, because no such agreement exists. My client made a one-time charitable donation to help with an emergency medical procedure. At no point did he agree to become Ms. Whitman's permanent health care provider." "And the party vendor situation?" "My client was never consulted about party planning and never agreed to pay for celebration expenses. Ms. Whitman apparently volunteered his credit without his knowledge or consent." Judge Hawkins nodded and then did something that made my entire week worthwhile. She asked me to speak directly. "Mr. Hale," she said, "do you have anything you'd like to say about these allegations?" I stood up, looked at Clara sitting there with her lawyer, and delivered what I considered to be my finest moment of courtroom eloquence. "Your Honor, I didn't abandon my sister-in-law. I just retired from being a human debit card. I paid for her surgery because it was an emergency and she's family. But paying for someone's medical emergency doesn't make me responsible for financing their entire lifestyle. If helping family members in crisis means signing up to pay their bills forever, then I think a lot of people would reconsider being helpful." Judge Hawkins actually smiled, which I took as a good sign. She looked at the paperwork one more time, then delivered her verdict with the authority of someone who had zero patience for frivolous lawsuits. "Case dismissed," she said, banging her gavel with what I swear was satisfaction. "Mr. Hale, you're under no legal obligation to provide ongoing financial support to anyone, family or otherwise, unless you've signed a contract specifically stating such. Ms. Whitman, I suggest you discuss future financial planning with a qualified advisor rather than the court system." And just like that, it was over. Clara's legal tantrum had lasted exactly 47 minutes and had accomplished nothing except proving that some people will sue anyone for anything if they think there's money involved. As we walked out of the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not just because I'd won, but because I'd finally seen the situation for what it really was. Not a family crisis, but a case study in entitlement and financial manipulation that had been dressed up as love and obligation. Sometimes you need a judge to tell you that you're not crazy for expecting people to pay their own bills. You know that feeling when you think you've reached the bottom of the barrel of human stupidity, only to discover that the barrel has a false bottom and there's a whole new level of idiocy waiting for you down there. Yeah, that was my Monday morning when Margaret showed up at my front door with a folded piece of paper and the kind of smile that women perfect when they're about to explain why something terrible is actually wonderful news. I'd been back from my vacation for exactly 3 days, just long enough to do laundry and catch up on all the ways my family had managed to embarrass themselves while I was gone. I was enjoying my first peaceful cup of coffee in my own kitchen when I heard the knock that would introduce me to a whole new dimension of family fuckery. Margaret stood on my doorstep looking like she'd just won the lottery, clutching that piece of paper like it was a winning ticket instead of what I was pretty sure was going to be another invoice for something I didn't buy. She was wearing her good news face, which in my experience usually preceded bad news delivered with enough spin to make a politician jealous. "Marcus, honey," she said, breezing past me into my living room like she owned the place. "You're not going to believe the wonderful thing that happened while you were away." Wonderful things involving Margaret usually meant expensive things involving my wallet, so I braced myself for whatever fresh hell she was about to unveil. "People heard about what you did for Clara," she continued, settling into my favorite chair like she was preparing for a long presentation, "and they were so inspired that they wanted to help." Help. In my experience, when Margaret said people wanted to help, It usually meant they wanted to help themselves to my money in creative new ways. She unfolded the paper with the dramatic flair of someone revealing a masterpiece and handed it to me with the kind of pride usually reserved for showing off grandchildren or explaining why your kid is definitely going to be famous someday. What I saw made my coffee taste like liquid regret. It was a printout of a GoFundMe page, complete with a professional-looking banner and multiple photos that told a story I definitely didn't remember living through. The headline read, "Help Marcus Hale. Local hero needs our support," in big, bold letters that made it sound like I was dying of some rare disease instead of just being financially exploited by my in-laws. The description was a masterpiece of creative writing that would have made fiction authors weep with envy. According to this version of events, I was a struggling working-class hero who had sacrificed everything to save Clara's life, leaving me financially devastated and unable to meet his own basic needs. Apparently, my $26,000 donation had left me facing eviction and financial ruin, which was news to me since I was sitting in my own house drinking coffee that I'd bought with my own money. But the real kicker was the photos. Someone had taken the hospital's viral post about my angelic generosity and combined it with what appeared to be stock photos of sad-looking people and empty wallets to create a visual narrative of my supposed poverty. There was even a picture of me from my company's website, but they'd somehow made it look grainier and more desperate, like I was applying for food stamps instead of sitting in a conference room. "Isn't it wonderful?" Margaret gushed, apparently oblivious to the fact that everything about this was fraudulent. "People care so much about what you did that they wanted to give back. Look how much they've raised." I looked at the fundraising total and nearly choked on my coffee. $14,372. 14 grand. People had donated over $14,000 to help me recover from the financial devastation of being generous to my family. Money that I definitely hadn't asked for problems I definitely didn't have, in my name without my knowledge or consent. "Margaret," I said, trying to keep my voice level while my brain processed the sheer scope of this latest family scam. "Who created this GoFundMe page?" "Oh, Clara set it up," she replied like this was the most natural thing in the world. She felt so bad about everything that happened, and when people started asking how they could help you, she thought this would be a nice way to give back. Clara felt bad. Right. So bad that she decided to commit charity fraud using my name and likeness to raise money from strangers who thought they were helping a guy in financial trouble. This was her way of giving back, by taking more, just in a more creative and technically illegal way. "And where exactly is this money?" I asked, because I had a sinking feeling I already knew the answer. Margaret's smile faltered just a little, like someone had dimmed the lights on her enthusiasm. "Well, Clara is holding on to it until you're ready to receive it. She didn't want to overwhelm you while you were dealing with everything else." Clara was holding on to it. Of course she was. Because nothing says giving back like raising money in someone else's name and then keeping it for safekeeping. I'm sure she was planning to give it to me eventually, right after she figured out how to explain why she needed to borrow some of it for her own expenses first. "Margaret," I said, standing up and walking to my computer, "I need to see this page for myself." I pulled up the GoFundMe website and searched for my name, and sure enough, there it was in all its fraudulent glory. But reading it online was even worse than seeing the printout, because I could see the comments from all the people who donated, and they were heartbreaking. "This man is a true hero," wrote someone who donated $50. "Hope this helps you get back on your feet. Thank you for showing us what family really means," added a woman who'd contributed $100. "God bless you for your sacrifice. My family went through something similar," shared another donor. "Know that you're not alone, and we're all rooting for you." These were real people, with real money, who genuinely wanted to help someone they thought was struggling because of his generosity. And they were being lied to, manipulated by a woman who'd turned my actual generosity into a fictional sob story designed to extract sympathy donations from strangers. I called GoFundMe's fraud reporting line immediately, because this wasn't just wrong, it was illegal. Identity theft, charity fraud, false representation. Clara had managed to commit about 17 different crimes in her quest to monetize my good deed. The representative I spoke with was professional, but clearly had heard this story before. "Unfortunately, this type of fraud has become more common," she explained. People create fundraisers using other people's stories without permission. We'll freeze the account immediately and investigate. Within 2 hours, the fundraiser had been frozen and Clara's access to the money had been cut off. The website now displayed a message saying the campaign was under review for potential violations of their terms of service, which was internet speak for someone got caught lying and the money's not going anywhere until we figure out what the hell happened. My phone started ringing around dinner time, and I let it go to voicemail because I knew exactly who it was and what they wanted to discuss. Clara's first message was pure panic. "Marcus, something's wrong with the GoFundMe page. People are saying it's been frozen and I can't access the account anymore. I think there's been some kind of mistake. Can you call them and fix it?" Fix it. She wanted me to call and fix the fraudulent fundraiser that she'd created using my identity without my permission. The audacity was so pure, so crystallized into voicemail form, that I actually saved the message just so I could play it back whenever I needed a reminder of why I'd made the right decision in distancing myself from these people. The second voicemail was from Sophie, and she sounded like she was calling from the scene of a natural disaster. "Marcus, Clara is freaking out about the GoFundMe thing. She says you reported it as fraud, but she was just trying to help people who wanted to support you. Can't you just let them give you the money? Let them give me the money. Money that had been raised through lies and false representations, using my name and story without my consent. Money that Clara had been holding on to for me while presumably planning to help herself to a management fee." The third voicemail was the one that really made my day. It was from Clara herself, and for the first time since this whole mess started, she sounded like she might actually understand the situation. "Marcus," she said, her voice small and tired. "I think I messed up. I never meant for things to get so complicated. I just wanted to help, and people kept asking how they could support you, and I thought maybe if I could raise some money, it would make up for everything that went wrong." There it was. Finally. An acknowledgement that things had gone wrong, that maybe her behavior hadn't been perfect, that possibly she bore some responsibility for the shitstorm that had engulfed our family for the past month. "I know you probably hate me right now," she continued, "but you're the only person in this family who actually shows up when it matters. Everyone else just talks about helping, but you actually do something about it. I'm sorry I made such a mess of everything." I sat there staring at my phone, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, a tiny crack in the wall of resentment I'd built around this situation. Not forgiveness, exactly, but maybe the possibility of understanding. But I still wasn't giving the money back. You know that moment in a crime movie when the detective finally connects all the dots and realizes that the seemingly unrelated incidents were actually part of one massive conspiracy? Yeah, that was my Thursday morning. Except instead of solving a murder, I was discovering that my family's financial fuckery had layers I never even imagined possible. I was sitting at my kitchen table, enjoying what had become my new morning ritual of coffee and schadenfreude, checking to see how many ways Clara's world was falling apart since the GoFundMe scandal broke, when I got an email that would make everything make sense in the most twisted way possible. The sender was someone named Jennifer Walsh, and the subject line read, "Follow-up questions about GoFundMe investigation." Now, I figured this was just GoFundMe's fraud department doing their due diligence, making sure they had all the facts before they decided what to do with the 14 grand that Clara had raised using my sob story. But when I opened the email, I realized this wasn't from GoFundMe at all. Jennifer Walsh was a journalist from the local newspaper who'd been covering the story of my viral heroism, and she'd started digging into the fundraiser scandal with the kind of thoroughness that makes corrupt politicians break out in cold sweats. "Mr. Hale," the email began, "I've been investigating the fraudulent GoFundMe campaign that was created using your identity, and I've discovered some irregularities in the financial routing that I believe you should be aware of. Would you be available for a phone call to discuss my findings?" Irregularities in the financial routing. That sounded like journalists speak for someone's been doing some shady shit with money, and I've got the receipts. I called her immediately, because if there's one thing I've learned from this whole experience, it's that when people start getting creative with other people's money, the creativity usually extends beyond what you can see on the surface. Jennifer turned out to be exactly what you'd expect from an investigative reporter. Sharp, thorough, and absolutely relentless when she smelled a story. She'd been tracking the GoFundMe money trail as part of her follow-up coverage, and what she'd found was more interesting than anyone had expected. "Mr. Hale, she said after we'd exchanged pleasantries. I've been looking into the bank account that the GoFundMe funds were being transferred to, and I discovered something unusual. The account isn't registered to Clara Whitman. That got my attention real quick. What do you mean? According to the banking information GoFundMe provided during their investigation, the funds were being routed to an account belonging to Sterling View Realty LLC. Do you know anything about that company? Sterling View Realty. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. Then it hit me like a truck carrying a load of irony. Sterling View Realty was Ezra's company. Ezra, Clara's fiancé, the guy who sold real estate with all the success of someone trying to sell ice to penguins, but somehow always had money for expensive clothes and fancy dinners. That's my sister-in-law's fiancé's real estate company, I told Jennifer, feeling pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in ways that made my stomach turn. Interesting, Jennifer said, and I could practically hear her taking notes. So Ms. Whitman was routing charity funds intended for you into her fiancé's business account. When she put it like that, it sounded even worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't just Clara being irresponsible with money or even committing simple charity fraud. This was a deliberate scheme to funnel donations into Ezra's business, using my story and my reputation as the bait. Can you send me the documentation you found? I asked, because I had a feeling I was going to need evidence of this latest family betrayal. Already on its way to your email, Jennifer replied. Mr. Hale, I have to ask, did you have any knowledge of this arrangement? None whatsoever, I said, which was becoming my standard response to questions about what my family was doing with money that had my name attached to it. After I hung up, I sat there staring at my coffee and trying to process the full scope of what had just been revealed. Clara and Ezra hadn't just created a fraudulent fundraiser. They'd created a money laundering operation using my identity as the front. People had donated money thinking they were helping me recover from financial hardship, but instead they were unknowingly investing in Ezra's failing real estate business. The emails from Jennifer arrived within minutes, and they painted a picture that was both infuriating and oddly impressive in its scope. The GoFundMe account had been set up with Clara's name and contact information, but the banking details routed everything directly to Sterling View Realty's business account. Ezra had then been using the funds to cover business expenses, pay off debts, and generally prop up his company's failing finances. But here's where it gets really beautiful. Jennifer had also pulled Sterling View Realty's business records, and they told a story that explained so much about the past few months. The company was hemorrhaging money, behind on rent, facing multiple lawsuits from clients, and basically circling the drain faster than water in a bathtub. Ezra wasn't just a mediocre real estate agent. He was a mediocre real estate agent whose business was about 6 months away from complete collapse. Suddenly, everything made sense. Clara's mysterious ability to afford expensive parties and designer clothes despite not having health insurance. Ezra's constant presence at family gatherings where he never seemed to have any clients to meet or properties to show. The way they'd both been so eager to paint me as the villain when I'd started asking questions about money. They'd been running a con, and I'd been the perfect mark, generous enough to pay for medical emergencies, family-minded enough to not ask too many questions, and successful enough to make their story believable. My $26,000 payment for Clara's surgery hadn't just covered her medical bills. It had probably kept Ezra's business afloat for another few months. And when that money ran out, they'd gotten creative. The GoFundMe scam wasn't just about raising a few $1,000s from sympathetic strangers. It was about creating a renewable income stream that could keep Sterling View Realty operating while using my reputation as the cover story. The most infuriating part was how perfectly they'd played their roles. Clara as the grateful but overwhelmed patient, Ezra as the supportive fiancé who stayed tactfully in the background, both of them working together to position me as either the hero who would keep paying or the villain who would abandon family in their time of need. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd gotten greedy. If they'd just taken my money and disappeared quietly into the background, I probably would have never figured out what they were really up to. But they couldn't resist the temptation to double dip, to create a whole second revenue stream using my identity and story. I forwarded Jennifer's emails to my lawyer because this was way beyond family drama now. This was criminal fraud on multiple levels, and these people had been using my name and reputation to commit it. Rebecca called me back within an hour, and she sounded like Christmas had come early. Marcus, she said, this is federal fraud. Wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering. They've committed enough crimes to start their own felony collection. We need to contact the FBI. The FBI. 6 months ago, the most dramatic thing in my life was deciding what to watch on Netflix. Now I was going to be calling federal agents to report my sister-in-law and her fiancé for running a charity scam using my identity. Life has a way of escalating quickly when you start paying attention to where your money actually goes. But before I made that call, I decided to do a little more digging on my own. If Ezra thought he was smart enough to run a con using my reputation, he was about to learn that I was smart enough to burn his whole operation to the ground. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing research that would have made Jennifer Walsh proud. Sterling View Realty's website was a masterpiece of creative fiction, claiming multiple award wins and client testimonials that sounded like they'd been written by the same person using different names. The company's social media presence was all smoke and mirrors, with photos of luxury properties that Ezra had clearly never sold and client success stories that read like badly written fan fiction. But the real gold mine was in the public records. Sterling View Realty had been named in 3 different lawsuits in the past year, had multiple complaints filed with the State Real Estate Commission, and had been operating with a suspended business license for the past 4 months. Ezra wasn't just running a con on my family. He was running a con on his entire client base. By evening, I had enough documentation to bury both of them so deep they'd need archaeologists to find their reputations. But I wasn't quite ready to make my move yet. I wanted to see how far they'd go, how much deeper they'd dig their hole before I decided to fill it in on top of them. Sometimes the best revenge isn't swift justice. It's giving people enough rope to hang themselves and then charging admission for the show. You know what they say about the best laid plans of mice and men? They usually go to shit when the FBI gets involved. But sometimes, just sometimes, the universe aligns in such a perfect way that justice feels less like a concept and more like a beautiful, inevitable force of nature working exactly the way it's supposed to. I spent Friday night putting together what I like to call my comprehensive fuck you package, a detailed dossier of every piece of evidence I collected about Clara and Ezra's little charity fraud operation. Bank statements, business records, screenshots of the fake GoFundMe page, Jennifer Walsh's investigative findings, and a timeline that laid out their entire con game like a roadmap to federal prison. Saturday morning, I drove to the FBI field office downtown with the satisfaction of a man who was about to serve justice with a side of poetic irony. The agent I spoke with was a sharp-eyed woman named Detective Sarah Chun who specialized in financial crimes and had the kind of professional demeanor that made you understand why criminals eventually confess just to get her to stop staring at them. Mr. Hale, she said after reviewing my evidence package, this is quite comprehensive. How long have you been investigating this situation? About a week, I replied. But they've been investigating my bank account for months. She almost smiled at that, which I took as a good sign. We'll need to verify all of this information, but based on what you've shown me, there are definitely federal crimes here. Wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering through a business entity. Your family members have been busy. Your family members. The way she said it made them sound like a criminal enterprise, which, come to think of it, was probably the most accurate description anyone had given them yet. What happens next? I asked. We investigate, we build a case, and if the evidence supports it, we make arrests. I should warn you, though, this kind of investigation can take time, and it might get messy for your family. Messy for my family. Right. Because up until now, everything had been smooth sailing in the good ship family harmony. Detective Chun, I said, my family has spent the last 6 months treating me like a human ATM, excluding me from celebrations I funded, suing me for refusing to pay for parties I wasn't invited to, and then committing federal crimes using my identity. I think we're already past the point of worrying about messy. She definitely smiled at that one. The investigation moved faster than I'd expected, probably because Clara and Ezra had been about as subtle as a marching band in their criminal activities. By Tuesday morning, Detective Chun called to tell me they'd frozen Sterling View Realty's bank accounts and were preparing search warrants for both Clara's apartment and Ezra's office. We'll be executing the warrants tomorrow morning, she told me. You might want to prepare yourself for some family drama. Some family drama. I was pretty sure we'd already exceeded the annual quota for family drama, but apparently there was still room for more. Wednesday morning, I was sitting on my couch drinking coffee and reading the news when my phone exploded with notifications like someone had just announced the apocalypse. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and enough voicemails to start my own podcast about family dysfunction. The first text was from Sophie. "What did you do?" The second was from Margaret. "FBI agents are at Clara's apartment. How could you do this to family?" The third was from Clara herself. "They took my computer and all my papers. They said you reported us. Marcus, please call me." But the real gem was a voicemail from Ezra, who apparently had finally figured out that his brilliant plan to defraud charity donors using my identity might have some consequences. "Marcus, man, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding," he said, using the kind of voice people use when they're trying to talk their way out of a speeding ticket. The GoFundMe thing was Clara's idea, and I was just helping her manage the money. I never meant for any of this to get so complicated. Can we talk? I'm sure we can work something out. Work something out. Like federal fraud charges were some kind of customer service issue that could be resolved with a firm handshake and a promise to do better next time. The voicemails got progressively more desperate as the day went on. Clara crying and begging me to call the FBI and tell them it was all a mistake. Margaret demanding that I fix this mess and threatening to disown me if I didn't make the charges go away. Sophie asking how I could destroy our family over money. Over money. Like the money they'd stolen from charity donors was just pocket change, and I was being petty for caring about federal crimes. But the most interesting call came from Clara's mother, Linda, who I hadn't heard from since Christmas dinner 3 years ago when she'd gotten drunk and told everyone exactly what she thought about their life choices. "Marcus," she said, sounding tired and older than I remembered, "I just wanted you to know that not everyone in this family thinks you're the villain here." Clara called me crying about the FBI thing, but when I heard what she and Ezra had been doing, "Honey, you did the right thing. Someone needed to stop them before they destroyed more lives." That voicemail hit me harder than all the angry ones combined, because it reminded me that somewhere underneath all the drama and financial manipulation, there were still people in this family who understood the difference between right and wrong. Thursday afternoon, Detective Chin called with an update that made my entire week worthwhile. "We arrested Ezra this morning," she said. Clara turned herself in around noon with her lawyer. "They're both being charged with wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Ezra's also facing money laundering charges related to his business." Arrested? Both of them. The people who'd spent months treating me like I was the problem were now in federal custody, probably wishing they'd stuck to more traditional forms of family exploitation. "What about the GoFundMe money?" I asked. "It's being returned to the donors. The platform has been very cooperative, and most people should see their money back within a few weeks." At least something good was coming out of this mess. The people who donated money thinking they were helping me would get their money back, and maybe they'd learn to be a little more careful about online charity scams in the future. Friday evening, I drove to a cabin I'd rented by the lake, about 2 hours outside of town. Not because I was running away from anything, but because I was finally running towards something: peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done the right thing, even when the right thing pisses off everyone you're related to. I sat on the deck with a beer and my journal, watching the sun set over the water and thinking about how much my life had changed in the past few months. 6 months ago, I was the family fixer, the guy everyone called when they needed money or problems solved. Now I was the family villain, the guy who'd chosen principles over keeping the peace. But you know what? I was okay with being the villain in their story, because in my story, I was finally the hero. The guy who'd learned to say no, who'd chosen self-respect over family approval, who'd stood up to people who'd been taking advantage of his generosity for years. I opened my journal and wrote, "You'll never steal my peace again." Then I raised my beer and toasted myself to the world's most sarcastic ATM, officially retired. In the distance, I could hear a loon calling across the water, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not at someone else's table, begging for scraps of respect and gratitude, but at my own table, with my own rules, and my own definition of what family should really mean. Sometimes you have to burn down the whole circus to remember that you were never supposed to be the clown.